Danny Quinn, and welcome back to my eponymous channel where I talk about stuff. Mainly movies, but I'm also open to talking about video games, books, music, art, etc, in a wide variety of styles. And today's topic is 10 movies that I personally think should be in the Criterion Collection. This is my personal opinion, and if you disagree with any of my picks, that's perfectly fine. If you think there are certain movies that should be in the Criterion Collection, feel free to let me know down in the comments below. In fact, make your own list. I'd love to see your responses, to see what you think should be in the Criterion Collection, because yeah, there's plenty of movies I think deserve that particular recognition. For those unfamiliar, the Criterion Collection is a home video distribution company that mainly specialises in releasing important, classic and contemporary films from around the world, in editions that offer the highest technical quality and award-winning original supplements. Sure, nowadays with the likes of Arrow, Shout Factory, 88 Films, Eureka and Powerhouse Films Indicator series, all devoted to putting out remastered editions of classic and obscure films, Criterion is probably not as big of a deal as it was in the 80s or 90s, but still, to have your film added to the collection is still something to be proud of. It's like when a band is inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's a sign that your film has well and truly hit the big leagues and that your name will stand alongside the all-time greats. Martin Scorsese, David Cronenberg, Brian De Palma, Wes Anderson, Ingmar Bergman, John Cassavetes, Charlie Chaplin, Lars von Trier, Jean-Luc Godard, John Woo, John Waters, Michael Bay. Yeah, Michael Bay has 2 movies in the Criterion Collection. Make of that what you will. So yeah, getting your film into the Criterion Collection is definitely one hell of an achievement. And although there are plenty of great films that have gotten a lot of recognition, there's still a couple of films that I think could definitely benefit from getting the Criterion treatment. And Criterion's 1000th official release right around the corner, I thought now would be a good time to offer some suggestions. No real ranking or ordering, just 10 movies that I personally would like to see in the collection at some point in the future. And considering that the likes of Armageddon, Flash for Frankenstein, Valley of the Dolls, Heaven's Gate and Female Trouble are in the Criterion Collection, that means literally anything is fair game. As long as the film hasn't been added to the official DVD or Blu-ray Criterion Collection, I'm considering it for this list and any other lists I make in this series in the future. So let's get started. You know, it's kind of a surprise that James Cameron doesn't have any movies in the Criterion Collection. Yeah, as I put it, work mainly consists of big budget blockbusters with hardly any subtlety to them at all, but at the same time he's probably one of the most successful and influential filmmakers of all time, and has proven time and time again that you should never bet against him. For better and for worse, James Cameron can mostly be counted on to deliver an exciting, engaging, suspenseful, and even at times emotionally devastating cinematic experience. Which is why I think at least one of his films could earn a spot in the Criterion Collection. I mean, if fucking Michael Bay can get 2 of his movies in the collection, I don't really see why James Cameron has to be excluded. Okay, I suppose getting the likes of Aliens or The Abyss or True Lies might be tough since they're now owned by Disney, and Disney really doesn't fuck around when it comes to the properties they own. If they have them, they're gonna keep them. Not to mention many of his movies have already had pretty excellent special edition releases on both DVD and Blu-ray, so I guess doing a Criterion release would be a bit redundant. Which brings us to The Terminator, the original 1984 classic that started Cameron's career and inspired an entire generation of science fiction and action movies. If you ask me, this movie would make for a great addition to the collection. Yeah, it does get kinda heavily overshadowed by its sequel, but it's still a fucking awesome film in its own right. It doesn't have the big budget or innovative special effects of the sequel, but what it does have is pure unapologetic B-movie thrills, a terrifying antagonist, and thoroughly unsettling ideas about the relationship between man and machine, even if they are explored a little bit better in T2. And if RoboCop, Orion's other big sci-fi classic and a pretty damn awesome movie in its own right, can get added into the Criterion Collection, I think it's only fair that RoboCop's distant cousin can sit alongside him. Not only is this movie one of the most influential examples of its genre, not only did it make a household name out of Arnold Schwarzenegger, not only did it launch the immortal catchphrase, "I'll be back,"
I'll be back.
Not only did it launch the career of one of the most successful, the best, and perhaps most egomaniacal directors in Hollywood, but it's a bloody great film in its own right, and one that's definitely worthy of the Criterion treatment, in my opinion. Brian De Palma's already had 3 movies in the Criterion Collection: Sisters, Dressed to Kill, and Blowout. All 3 of these movies are absolutely amazing in their own right, and yet I still feel like the collection's kind of incomplete without the addition of a few more De Palma classics. Phantom of the Paradise would be a pretty awesome addition, even if it is now owned by Disney, and the film has not only gotten the Arrow video treatment, but it's also been remastered by Shout Factory, so I guess that rules that movie out. So for the time being, I'm sticking to Body Double. Released in 1984 after De Palma's highly controversial Scarface, Body Double aroused just as much anger among the critics as his previous film did. There were the typical comments about De Palma just being a talentless Hitchcock impersonator, which is a fair point, I suppose. I mean, this film is pretty much his version of Rear Window, with just the slightest hint of Vertigo. But it also attracted a fair bit of controversy over its subject matter. I mean, let's face it, it's not often you see big movies where the main character openly stalks a woman, seemingly to keep her safe from a much more threatening figure, or where a major Hollywood production delves into pornography. This movie is trashy and perhaps a bit problematic, but it's such a delightfully playful piece of trash that I honestly really do love the hell out of it, regardless. In many respects, this movie kind of feels like a spiritual sequel to Dressed to Kill and Blowout, combining the trashiness and sleaze of the former, and the meta, almost self-reflectiveness tone of the latter. And frankly, De Palma's trilogy of early 80s Hitchcock tributes just isn't complete without it. Furthermore, I do believe that Sony Pictures has a license that allows them to release Criterion releases outside of the USA, and since Body Double is distributed by Columbia Pictures, which Sony Pictures just so happens to own, I'd really like to see that happen. If you ask me, any of Sam Raimi's 3 Evil Dead films are worthy of a spot in the collection, and picking only one was a task unto itself. Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness are practically classics in their own rights, and while the spot is partially assigned to the first movie, feel free to consider this pick a request for all 3 Evil Dead films to be added to the Criterion Collection. The first one is a no-budget classic that's full of gore and shock value, but with a genuine sense of tension and even a considerable amount of humour. Despite its minuscule budget, there's still plenty of charm to be found in the film, not least because of Bruce Campbell's breakout performances as Ash and Sam Raimi's DIY direction. The sequel amps up the humour but still doesn't shy away from the gore and horror, so it's almost like the perfect balance between the two. It's a much more polished and well-made film than the first one, but still has this raw DIY-like feel to it. And Army of Darkness, while it's a lot more tongue-in-cheek and simplistic in story, even by the standards of this franchise, it's still a pretty damn funny movie in its own right, and Bruce Campbell's probably at his finest in this century. The films have generally been treated quite well on home video. The Blu-ray box set I have of all 3 films does have some really cool extras, but at the same time there's still a part of me that would love to see Criterion have a go at remastering these 3 films. It'd be pretty fun to see a few documentaries about the films, maybe even some of Sam Raimi's early short films like Clockwork and Within the Woods bundled alongside them, and possibly an opportunity to choose between all the various different cuts of Army of Darkness. I mean, even if the Criterion Collection does tend to gravitate towards more prestigious, more, sophisticated fare, that still doesn't mean there isn't any room for the Evil Dead movies. I mean, for fuck's sake, they put out quite a few John Waters movies, they put out Flash for Frankenstein, which, need I remind you, was a video nasty just like the first Evil Dead film. So if a movie that tells you to fuck life in the gallbladder can get into the Criterion Collection, I definitely think there's some room for this. Ladies and gentlemen, I rest my case. Peter Jackson is one of those filmmakers who can literally make anything. And since his movies generally get a ton of love and care put into them on home video with lengthy extended cuts and tons of extras, it'd be pretty cool to see Jackson's older movies get that treatment. I mean, how awesome would it be if something like Heavenly Creatures or Brain Dead or even fucking Meet the Feebles was added to the Criterion Collection? I mean, Jackson himself has been on record as stating that he's hoping to remaster his earlier naughty films so that he can put them out with tons of extras, and frankly, who better to put them out for him than Criterion? In Jackson's own words, "I've done some tests on Braindead where we took the 16mm negative and put it through a restoration pipeline, and shit, it looks fantastic. I'm pretty keen just to get them back out there again. That's sort of my plan for now, to do a nice little box set, the early years, the naughty years. The mixes on those old films were pretty much all stereo in those days, so we're going to get the old soundtracks and do a 5.1 mix. I've always had video diaries being shot, so I've got about an hour or two of us shooting Bad Taste, 7 or 8 hours of us shooting Meet the Feebles, 50 to 60 hours of us filming Braindead, and at least 70 hours of us doing Heavenly Creatures. And it's not just people talking to camera, it's actually a guy on the set filming us making the film. So there's some pretty interesting stuff there, and none of it has ever been out. So yeah, a box set of Jackson's earliest films would be awesome, especially if Criterion was the one putting them out. Maybe even Eureka or Arrow as well, but Criterion putting out something like Meet the Feebles would be a real treat. Not too sure about replacing the old sound mix, but hey, releasing all of Jackson's older movies on Blu-ray and giving them a new coat of paint, I'd certainly save up my money and add it to my ever-growing home video collection. David Cronenberg is no stranger to the Criterion Collection, with 5 movies added as of the time of this video: The Brood, Scanners, Videodrome, Dead Ringers, and Naked Lunch. But yet there's still plenty of films in his filmography that could potentially benefit from the Criterion treatment. His adaptation of J.G. Ballard's Crash, A History of Violence, and of course his remake of 1958's The Fly. This movie takes the concept of the man and a fly getting all mixed up in a different direction. Whereas in the original the man and the fly both swapped body parts, in this film they began to fuse together some kind of hideous and rather monstrous Spider-Man foe. Yeah, remakes in general kind of get a massive bad rap, and perhaps deservedly so, since many of them are just soulless attempts to cash in on the earlier film. But the 1986 Fly is a massive exception. It's what happens when you take a concept that made the original work quite well and flip it completely on its head. The special effects are obviously the stuff of legend, some of the most gorgeously gory, gruesome and grotesque creature effects to have ever hit the silver screen. And what's so cool about the main character's transformation is how it's presented as being gradual. Up until the very end, there's still a slight semblance of humanity as Jeff Goldblum's Seth Brundle changes. It's stuff like that which really adds an element of tragedy to what is otherwise both a very unconventional romantic comedy and a distinctively Cronenbergian horror drama. It's one of the few horror movies that can truly scare on an emotional level. And that's why I think it'd be a pretty worthy addition to the Criterion Collection. Yes, I know Disney owns the film, and like with everything they own, they're probably gonna keep a firm fucking grip on it. But if Disney ever decides to finally loosen up on their whole forced scarcity shite and let some of the movies and properties that don't really fit their family-friendly image out to some other distributors to restore and treat with care, Criterion would probably be the ones to hand it to, especially considering just how many other Cronenberg films are in the collection. You know what really kind of confuses me? The fact that Martin Scorsese is easily one of the best, most highly acclaimed filmmakers of all time, and yet he only has 2 movies in the Criterion Collection: The Age of Innocence and The Last Temptation of Christ. Yes, I know that 2 movies is more than most filmmakers will ever end up in the collection, but considering just how many classic films Scorsese has under his belt, not just from the old days, but even in more recent years, it just kind of strikes me as the slightest bit odd that he doesn't have any other films in the collection, and quite frankly, I think it's about time to change that. Taxi Driver is easily one of the most seminal films of the 1970s, and to me at least, it represents something of a transitional period for cinema. It's that mix of old and new filmmaking sensibilities, with Scorsese's gritty, noir-esque vision of New York feeling weirdly contemporary, yet the score by Bernard Herrmann feels like it's come right out of the 1960s, and I mean that in the best possible way. For its time, it's a haunting portrayal of isolation and instability, which still rings eerily true even in 2019. I mean, that's probably why the Joker took so much inspiration from it. Even by today's standards, it's still a very shocking and visceral experience. And I think it's about time that Criterion acknowledged that in some way. Yeah, I know Criterion has shown a lot of love for filmmakers of the new Hollywood era, like De Palma, Polanski, and Ashby, and Bogdanovich, among several others, but to see that they only have 2 movies from Martin Scorsese, it's kind of a little bit disappointing. And since Taxi Driver is distributed by Columbia Pictures and Sony is involved with Criterion, I think it would only make sense for them to put it out in Criterion Collection again. Please, Criterion, if you can, update that seal of approval for DVD and Blu-ray because it really fucking needs it. Easily the most recent film to appear on the list, I did have a bit of a hard time deciding whether to include this or Hereditary, since both movies are absolutely outstanding horror films that serve as a terrific showcase for Ari Aster. I've already reviewed Midsommar, my opinion of it hasn't changed any since then. I still really dig the hell out of it. It's an unsettling, slow, eerie, emotionally haunting, and surprisingly funny film that'll probably rank high on my best films of the year list, and Florence Pugh easily gives one of the most sympathetic performances I've seen this year. And with the film sporting an almost 3-hour long extended cut that's only available on Apple TV in the US, I think it only makes sense for Criterion to put the film out on home video somewhere down the line, and bundle both the theatrical and the extended cuts together with shitloads of extras about the making of the film. Not to mention, it'd be pretty awesome to see if any of Ari Aster's shorts could get bundled together alongside it. Maybe a box set of Ari Aster's entire work, including this, Hereditary, and his early short films from before he made it big. If anything, I'd definitely buy the Criterion version of Midsommar just to see what the fuck goes on inside Ari Aster's head. Because quite frankly, I'm simultaneously intrigued yet terrified to see what goes on inside it. Yes, I know, like with Taxi Driver, Trainspotting was in the Criterion Laserdisc collection, but just like Taxi Driver before, that seal of approval has yet to be upgraded to DVD and Blu-ray. Like Taxi Driver, it's very much a film that perfectly embodies its time period, and yet it still has quite a bit of resonance even to this day. This movie is a classic in how it deals with difficult subject matter that's both unflinching and uncompromising, but also very accessible. Film 4 already put out a pretty good release of the film on DVD and Blu-ray, so I think it would only makes sense for Criterion to take the extras from that release and maybe go the extra distance. A few new interviews or featurettes about the film's impact, especially at the time, a lengthy booklet going in depth about the film and some cool artwork alongside it, that would certainly be more than welcome on any release of Trainspotting in the distant future. And since Criterion has just recently branched out into distributing their releases in the UK, I think it would only make sense if they could put out Trainspotting again. So if they're able to get back the rights to put out a release of Trainspotting in the distant future, hell yes, I'd pay money for that. Martin McDonagh made a name for himself with 2008's In Bruges, a dark comedy drama about two hitmen played by Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell as they await judgment for a hit gone wrong. It's a film that's brutally funny and emotionally devastating in equal measures, and showed that McDonagh was a filmmaking talent worth looking out for. And as far as I'm concerned, he hasn't put a foot wrong yet, and I'm genuinely excited to see what he does next. In Bruges, I think, is a film that would definitely be worthy of a spot in the Criterion Collection. It's a very phenomenal film in its own right, with excellent performances, absolutely excellent writing and direction from McDonagh, and for a movie that deals with serious topics like guilt and suicide, it's surprisingly empathetic and full of levity. At the time, I think people were probably kind of caught off guard by just how sad and gut-wrenching this film could get, but time has honestly been very kind to it, and it's even got itself a release in second sight in the UK, so I think it only makes sense for Criterion to do something similar for America, also so that when Americans buy the movie they don't have to look at this bullshit cover. I mean, yeah, the home video cover for the UK isn't great, but at least it gives you a slight idea that this isn't going to be your typical Hitman movie, but this? What the fuck even is this? Stupid cover aside, In Bruges I think could definitely benefit from the Criterion seal of approval. It's a bloody brilliant movie that's both funny and poignant in equal measures, and I think it'd be right up Criterion's alley. John Carpenter's remake of The Thing from Another World has had an interesting history over the years. Upon its release, it was both a box office bomb, having been released at roughly around the same time as Blade Runner and a little movie called E.T. that was practically dominating the box office at the time, and it was just straight up despised by both critics and audiences alike. Keep in mind, this wasn't just the typical, oh, critics are kind of mixed on it at the time but grew to appreciate it over the years. No, the critics were fucking vicious towards this poor movie. Like, if you ever get the chance, go back and read some of the initial reviews for the thing, because they are straight up hostile towards this movie. Nowadays, the film is rightfully considered a classic, and many of the things that people hated about it at the time, including its bleak tone, its flawed and salty characters, its themes about paranoia and distrust, and above all else, its shockingly gruesome visual effects, are all now considered major strengths. Much like The Fly after it, The Thing is a testament to just how great practical effects can be, and it's really quite baffling that it wasn't even considered for an Oscar nomination. Even with all the vitriol that was directed towards it when it was brand new, this movie is pretty much the cinematic equivalent of The Ugly Duckling. And that's precisely why I want to see it get added to the Criterion Collection. Yeah, it's a classic, don't get me wrong, it's a very, very good film, but it's also a testament to the power of hindsight and how time can often change things for the better. What was once that gruesome, nasty, nihilistic little alien movie that nobody wanted when it was new is now a visually inventive, dread-filled and atmospheric cult favourite, which has gone on to influence many of our favourite films, TV shows and games, as well as many filmmakers. Adding this movie to the Criterion Collection would be a major recognition of the talents of the likes of John Carpenter, Kurt Russell and Rob Bottin, among many others. And it might even serve as a light of hope to those films that, for whatever reason, were either completely overlooked or were just straight up derided when they were new. I mean, yeah, it's awesome when a movie gets the recognition and respect that it deserves right from the get-go, but sometimes the true classics do really reveal themselves to us over time. And The Thing, in my opinion, is a testament to that. It's a testament to how a film can be treated with scorn, contempt, hatred, sometimes through no real fault of its own other than just being the product of abysmal timing. But through it all, through all of the anger, through all of the rage, through all of the bitterness, it eventually finds its audience and finally gets the recognition that it deserves. I mean, at the end of the day, no matter what some shits on the internet tell you, film is a highly subjective medium. We're not all going to like the same things, and we're not even going to dislike the same things. I mean, one man's turd could be another man's treasure. A film might get a pretty bad reputation upon release, but over time that bad reputation fades away and gives way to genuine love, genuine respect. Almost to the point that you might be surprised to hear that The Thing was nominated for a Razzie. Yeah, I shit you not, this was considered a contender for Worst Musical Score. Yeah, it's not like they nominated John Carpenter for a Razzie or anything, but still, that's just fucking mind-boggling. It's like knowing that Brian De Palma was nominated for a Razzie at least 6 times in his career, mostly for films that just didn't deserve it. Seriously. They nominated the score for The Thing, which is probably some of Ennio Morricone's best work, for a Razzie. Fuck me. I mean, fuck, if you feel like the Razzies are going after easy targets nowadays by nominating the likes of Mother and all these films that don't really deserve it in certain aspects, they've always been kind of doing that. Some things just don't change, do they? Hindsight can ultimately be a wonderful thing, and the Criterion Collection is in many respects a testament to that. And while it's unlikely that every movie on this list will be added to it anytime soon, I sincerely hope that at least some of these movies will. But at the end of the day, that's just my personal opinion. I mean, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me on any of these picks, feel free to let me know down in the comments below. And don't throw a hissy fit if your personal pick hasn't been included in this list. I'm very seriously tempted to make this an ongoing series. So again, let me know down in the comments below what movies you'd like to see added to the collection, because chances are I'll probably add it to a future list. Thank you once again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, leave a comment, maybe even subscribe to my channel while you're at it. And if you're already subscribed, don't forget to hit the bell icon so that you'll be notified about videos that I've just dropped. And if there's anything I can do to improve my presentation, do let me know. I'm always happy to hear feedback as long as it's somewhat constructive. If you want to follow me on social media or support me on Patreon or check out my website when it's finally uploaded, links will be below down in the description. And until next time, I'm Danny Quinn, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.